importance. You're live with BBC News. Now, we can't independently verify the numbers provided by the Hamas-run Health Ministry, but what we do know is that children in Gaza are dying at an unprecedented scale and rate. The Palestinians say more than 4,500 children have died in just under 6 weeks. Many others have been orphaned or injured. You don't need to be an expert to know what severe mental trauma all this leaves behind, or how it will inevitably drive the endless circle of violence in the years ahead. But there is one British charity that's been funding a clinic in Gaza to try to rehabilitate some of these children. The man who runs it, trained in Bristol here in the UK, is Mohammed Sharif. His clinic and his patients are in northern Gaza, and some weeks ago he ignored an Israeli order to evacuate. Our reporter Ru Abbas has been keeping in contact with him. Here's his story.
Hello from Gaza. I'm Mohammed Sharif. I live North Gaza Strip in Palestine. I stay with my children, Hadi and Ilyas and Hafiz.
Mohammed sent us this video in early November from his home in Jabalia camp, where the Israeli army has carried out some of its deadliest bombings. He told us he had been distracting his children with colouring and drawing activities to help them cope. But the picture outside was a harsh reality.
That's how we wake up every morning. This is sound every day. Palestine.
He told us he decided to stay back with 9 of his family members because the road to the south was too dangerous and people were being killed along the way. Mohammed lives dangerously close to the Indonesian hospital, which, according to Human Rights Watch, has been struck multiple times by Israeli forces during October. The Israelis claim the structure sits above a network of Hamas tunnels and a launch pad for their rocket attacks. The infrastructure around Mohammed's home had soon turned to rubble. And as the days progressed, he told us he was afraid to go outside to search for food and water. And when he did, all he saw was suffering.
See in the sky.
Meanwhile, reports of the sharp increase in the death toll terrified him.
No food.
Israel maintains that it warns residents to evacuate the areas it targets. But whenever the electricity and internet were cut off, Mohammed feared being isolated from the outside world.
I send big message for in the world. We need to freedom. We need to freedom. We need to safety place for me and for my children and for my family and for all the children in Gaza Strip. We need peace.
But one night, he eventually dared to head outside and sent us this video on the 11th of November. That was the last time we heard from Mohammed.
Well, our reporter Ru Abbas, who put that report together for us, is with me in the studio. Tell me about your relationship with Mohammed and why you've not been able to get in contact with him.
Well, Christian, as you know, our job here is to speak to people in Gaza to get an idea of the picture on the ground. It has been particularly challenging speaking to Mohammed given the limitations of communications, fuel, electricity that we've been reporting about. And but one thing that really did come through was how emotionally crippled he felt by not being able to provide for his family. So, as mentioned in the report you just saw, not only was he responsible for his 3 children, but more family members. There were 10 of them in totality. And of course he felt a huge responsibility, and no parent would want to watch their children starve. And he was completely crippled by the decision that he had made. He was debilitated by it because he took the decision not to go south because everyone was telling him that it's too dangerous. So ultimately, that is the decision he's taken, and that's the decision that he felt was best for his family. But having said that, I have spoken to other people who know him, and they say that he is very protective of his children, and he wants to see his children have a future. He wants his sons to be educated and learn English. And in fact, one person even labeled him Tiger Dad. So I think it's difficult now to understand where he is, what's happening. And obviously, since the conflict began, one person said that he immediately reached out to them and said, we have to do something about the children. And he's essentially dedicated his entire life to helping traumatized children and rehabilitate them.
OK, well, we hope that we'll be able to make contact with him. Of course, a lot of people can't charge their phones at the minute because there's no power in Gaza. The charity that supports Mohammed in Gaza is ACTI International. They've trained him and others in war zones around the world in how to deliver this one-on-one therapy to children who are suffering the severest forms of PTSD. The executive chair is the trustees is Stella Charman. She's with us tonight. Stella, thank you for being with us. Of course, because we've had contact with this man for several days now, Mohammed, we're worried about him. We want to know what's happened to him. Have you been able to make any contact with him?
The only thing I've heard is via one of his colleagues who is in the south of Gaza, who's had an SMS text from him to say that he's alive. But fundamentally, he's out of contact. There's no internet. And so really, we are all very worried about Mohammed because he has been very, very good at keeping in touch with a number of people very regularly. So we are really hoping that he and his family are safe.
Just pressed for time, Stella. Tell me about the training he had in Bristol and how he's been using that in Gaza.
Well, we teach a very unique treatment called Children's Accelerated Trauma Treatment, which was designed with children for children who suffer the severest forms of PTSD. And we've used it and trained people to use it all over the world. And Mohammed really took this on board and was very excited by it and took it back to Gaza when he returned. And we supported him, and with 2 other charities, the International Medical Education Trust and Firefly International, he, with our help, set up a child trauma clinic, which has established a really good reputation, or had established a really good reputation over the last 3 years in Gaza, using this technique with over 300 children and supporting very many more with education and psychosocial support.
Well, listen, we'll keep a check on Mohammed, and we'll perhaps come back to you in the days ahead. But Stella, thank you very much for the moment. Mohammed Al-Sharif, who is currently missing, who runs a clinic in northern Gaza for the rehabilitation of children with PTSD. We're going to take a very